Have you ever been discouraged? If you're like me and like most people, you've had a fair amount of discouragement in your life. A little over a year ago, I became overnight a full-time caregiver for my wife. I was 80 years old. My wife's 78. I'm 81 now. What I've learned over this last year has been a real experience. My wife and I were both shocked, discouraged, and literally despondent regarding the event that put her in the hospital and set me in motion to be her full-time caregiver this last year. But I've had discouragement over my entire life. For the last 50 years, I've had discouragement that's been crippling and some that's been not so bad. But in this video, I want to share with you the 3 things that have helped me over the years to turn discouragement into encouragement. If that's of interest to you, I hope you stick around. This is Old Mike, Old Me, living better. Some 30 years ago, I was working at a radio station. I was the top salesman at that radio station. My wife and I had a once-a-week radio broadcast that was very popular. One day I was called into the station manager's office. I thought maybe I'm going to get a raise or a promotion or something. Instead, I was fired. That's right, I was fired. The worst part was the manager wouldn't tell me why I was fired. I was just gone and done. That set off almost 3 months of a downhill spiral for me. Not only was I discouraged, I became depressed. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. My life pretty much stood still for those 3 months. Discouragement can be crippling depending on the circumstances and how impactful the discouragement is. So about 3 months later, a friend of mine took me to lunch and we were talking. He leaned across the table and he said, "Mike, when are you going to finally accept what happened and decide to move forward?" Well, I didn't want to hear that. The reason is I couldn't accept what happened to me. You know, if somebody had told me why I was fired, then I could make changes and move on, but not knowing why drove me nuts. And then all of a sudden being unemployed and not having an income, man, it was tough. So I went home from that lunch meeting and I journaled. And I remember writing down, I can't accept this. I'm not going to accept it. I sat on that and I stewed for another couple of weeks. One morning I was reviewing my journal entries and I came across that entry. And I saw what I'd written. I'm not going to accept it. Right then I thought, could this be the one thing that's holding me back now from moving forward? And right at that moment, I did a mental shift. That mental shift was to accept what it was that was going on, what it was that happened. That is the first thing that you and I need, at least that I needed, to turn discouragement into encouragement. Remember, I told you there's 3 things. The first one is accepting the circumstance. If I can't accept the circumstance, then I'm going to be stuck in the circumstance. Sometimes it's hard to accept what happens, the events of life and all of the things that happen. But once I made the mental shift to simply accept what had happened, it was like all of a sudden the world opened up again. I began to see things I hadn't seen. I was able to leave that behind, accept what had happened, and it gave me courage to move forward. I think it's interesting that both the word discouragement and encouragement have the word courage in the middle of them, or the root of them. If I'm disappointed and discouraged, or I'm encouraged for some reason or whatever, courage is at the heart of it. To turn discouragement into encouragement, I have to learn how to move with a certain amount of courage in moving forward. And the way you do that in the very beginning, you have to accept what has happened. That will free you up, at least it freed me up, to move forward. The second thing I've discovered that is so vital, besides accepting, I have to understand that I need to take control of what I can control. This is an old Stoic thought. I think it came from Seneca, that you can only control what you can control. Don't try to control what you can't control. So in the case of my wife, we ended up in the hospital. She was there for a few days, and then she had to go to rehab. And I got to tell you, if you've never been discouraged before, you go to rehab, or one of your loved ones goes to rehab, and your discouragement level will go way up. I mean, you walk into the average rehab place here in America, and it's a discouraging thing. You walk down the hallways, you hear people calling out, "Nurse, nurse, help, help." Sometimes these places don't smell very good. I mean, a rehab center is at a level of discouragement, and that's the reaction I had when I first walked into the rehab center where my wife was at. There was not much I could do about controlling what goes on in the rehab center. They're usually overpopulated with patients and understaffed. The level of the staff and the care is probably different from rehab facility to rehab facility. But you're not going to get 5-star accommodations or 5-star care in a rehab facility. So when I first went in there, I was very discouraged because, number one, my wife was very discouraged. She was not getting her medicines on time. She wasn't getting personal care on time. I mean, it was horrible. And I witnessed several family members or friends arguing and yelling and screaming at the staff in the rehab center. Oh, my word. If you try to control a situation by yelling at people that are out of your control, that's not going to go very far. So what I decided to make friends with the staff, the nurse, everybody that I could. Most of you know I carry around a voice recorder all the time. I started recording people's names down so I wouldn't forget them. And I was extra kind to them. So I couldn't control when my wife got her medication. I couldn't control a lot of things. But one thing I could control was my reaction to the staff, my reaction to the situation. I could control how I presented myself to my wife. If I went in there and I started complaining and just entering into the drama of everything, that wouldn't have helped her out at all. I can control my emotions. I can control my reactions. So in this process of being in the rehab center, as I made friends with different staff, I learned the system. I became friends with the head nurse. She gave me her cell phone number. I was able to pick up the phone and call. If my wife called me at home and said, "I haven't got my pill, I didn't get my bath, this hasn't happened, everything's a mess," I could pick up the phone and call her nurse on the phone. I don't think anybody else in the facility had that privilege or opportunity or that gift. How did I get that gift? I got that gift by controlling my emotions, controlling my feelings, and deciding that I was going to turn this place of discouragement and control what I could control, face it with courage, so that the outcome would benefit my wife. I cannot control the outcomes. I can control my reaction and how I deal with the situation. and hope for the best on the outcomes. But I can't control the outcome. That's out of my hands. If it works out good, then great. If it doesn't work out good, I have to go back to acceptance and start all over again, right? So the third thing is time. First is acceptance, second is control, and third is time. What do I mean by time? I mean that I cannot rush certain things. I could not rush my wife's recovery. I couldn't rush getting a job 30 years ago. I could control certain things and I had to accept certain things, but then I have to give the events and whatever is taking place in my life time for an outcome. Remember, I can't control the outcome, and sometimes I can't be patient enough to wait for the outcome. Maybe you're like me. I stand in front of the microwave and say, hurry up. I don't have any patience at all. When I accept the fact that when the doctors tell me it's going to take 3 months, 5 months, 2 years for your wife to recover, or for you to recover from something, that's a long time. So I have to accept the circumstance. I have to control what I control, but then I have to be patient enough to wait for all of the processes and the events to take place. In other words, I have to live through the experience. Now, I can live through the experience and not be discouraged if I'm facing that experience with courage. Let me leave you with a bonus thought. It's from one of my most favorite Bible verses. It's James chapter 1, verse 2. Let me read it to you. Consider it or count it all joy when you encounter or go through trials, various trials. Verse 3, knowing that the testing of your faith, or whatever you're going through, produces endurance or patience. The first concept in these two verses is very powerful. Consider it all joy. Well, how can I consider my wife all of a sudden ending up in the ER, ending up in rehab? How can I consider that joy? That seems insane. But you listen to psychologists and therapists and all kinds of gurus. They talk about a mind shift, changing your mind, changing your direction. And there's power in that. Part of that power is being able to redefine something that has gone on, that has been a trial, and instead of counting it as discouragement, counting it as failure, counting it as something that's going to ruin your life, it's possible that you can take enough courage and say, you know what? I'm going to consider that joy. I'm going to consider that there's something more going on. But you see, you have to make a decision to make that happen. It's not going to happen automatically. Like me, 30 years ago, I wallowed for 3 months in non-acceptance. I didn't have the courage to accept what had happened to me. I didn't have the wherewithal to see the power of this particular verse and look at that perspective from a different angle. It's always possible to look at everything in life in a different way. Even the tragedies in life, I can look at it a different way. And I don't mean to diminish the pain and suffering and agony of a tragedy. I don't mean to communicate that at all. But what I mean is that for me to move from discouragement to encouragement, I have to have enough courage to redefine what needs to be redefined in my life. For me, this James chapter 1, verse 2 and 3 is an answer to that. The things that happen in my life, I can attach a definition to it. The worst event in my life, it destroyed my life. I'll never recover from it. Do you think that kind of a mindset is going to help you get well, get better, move on with courage? No. You'll be stuck on number one. You didn't accept whatever happened to you. Now, you may not like it. Because you accept something doesn't necessarily mean you like it. It's just that you accept it. That's what happened. And then you move into controlling what you can control. And then you give it enough time for it to work out. In the second verse, James 1, 2, and 3, is this concept that testing produces something in my life. It's either endurance or patience, same meaning for those two words, similar meaning anyway. Testing produces endurance. I grow when I am tested. It's a fact. I've learned more from my failures in my life than I ever have from my successes. The reason is I don't analyze my successes very often. My failures, yeah, I analyze those up and down, try to figure out what in the world happened. If you're going through a test right now, I'm going to assume that there's something being worked out in your life. You're going through a test right now. There's something being worked out in your life. You can resist it, or you can take control of what you can control. And you can move with courage forward. That's what I've had to do. My wife got out of rehab. She came home. We have healthcare professionals in and out of the house, but I'm making all the meals. I'm doing all of the kind of home healthcare that a loved one or a spouse would do for someone else. Some of you know that my wife and I have been married 60 years this year. And we've been in it for the long haul. It's not been easy. It's challenging. There are days that I get discouraged, I'll admit to you. But I face those days by refreshing these three things in my life. And sometimes in any given week, I have to refresh these three things several times in any 1 week period. I have to reaccept. I have to take back control of what I can control. And I have to give it time. I hope this video, though, helps you a little bit, that it might encourage you, especially if you need encouragement today. So I'm here to tell you and share with you from old Mike, you can do this. You can. Accept, control, take the time. And you can move forward with courage. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you next time.